Hey everybody, and welcome back to this episode of Full Spectrum. I'm Andrew. Have you ever wondered how to make a Cat5 cable? Looked at all the pieces and parts and wondered where to even start? We're going to teach you how to do that today, right here on Full Spectrum. Making a Cat5 cable is actually pretty easy. You just need a few basic tools. I've outlaid them right here in front of us. So for starters, you need a good basic box knife. You need snips. You need the Cat5 crimper, probably a Cat5 checker so that you can make sure that everything is wired the way that you expected it to, as well as Cat5 and some Cat5 connectors. Let's begin. I'm going to take my crimpers, and essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this Cat5 cable, put it into the actual stripping portion, which will actually strip the external protective layer of the cable back. So what that did, by me crimping down using these, so you actually crimp down, and you notice there's a small little hole here where it can actually pivot around the cable. When it pivots around the cable, it actually breaks open that external layer, exposing the cables underneath. So what you want to do is, I typically don't do a full 360, I maybe do like a 180 around it, because you'll see here, what happens is it actually breaks that portion open, again exposing it, and it doesn't actually break it on this side, which is no big deal. What I typically do is I break one side and then I bend it back. This is where the drywall knife is important, because what you can do is you can take your drywall knife and you simply just apply pressure over that external jacket. And if you have a really sharp knife, this is the important part. When it's really sharp, by simply just applying the pressure, it actually breaks the rest of it. Then it's pretty simple. You just take this, discard it. And then there's this little pull line. Some have kind of like a plastic guide through them. Others have this like small, very thin rope running through the actual wire itself. So what you want to do is you want to pull it all back, take your drywall knife and cut it away. And you'll want to cut it away at the base of where the jacketing started, where you actually cut the jacket, because you don't want that to get in the way of you pulling all these out to create the connector. If you do some research into Cat5 cables, you'll notice that there's two different standards. There's a 568A and a 568B. Typically speaking, the 568A was meant for voice. 568B is meant for data. So for today's applications, I'm going to make a 568B cable, which means that the color code follows under the 568B standard. So once we get the cable open and we've taken that jacket off, what you'll notice is that there's twisted pairs: an orange pair, a green pair, a brown pair, and a blue pair. And so what I typically do is I separate them out with their colors. So I put the brown to one side, the green to another side, and the blue to another side. So it kind of just fans out very easily. From there, what you'll want to do is you'll want to untwist each pair and kind of flatten them out so that they become straight, so that they're easier to work with. That way they don't have the bends from the twisting from the manufacturing. So what you do is you just untwist them. And you can just use your fingers for this. It's not a problem. Perfect. So what you'll notice is that the first color up, and I'm going to mess this up because it's the way that I've always called it. I refer to orange white as white orange. So I always refer to it first as it being white as the designator, followed by the actual color. Because you'll notice that there's white blue, there's white brown, and white green, as well as the solid white greens, or excuse me, as well as the solid colors. So protocol goes like this: white orange, then solid orange, white green, then solid blue, then white blue, then green, then white brown, and brown. Okay. If I lost you, you might be wondering what am I doing? Well, essentially what I'm doing is I'm trying to keep all of the cables flat to prepare them to go into this connector. So as I'm pulling them out, I'm starting it from my left to right. And essentially I'm doing it in that order that they're talking about here on our cheat sheet. So essentially we're going to do white, orange, orange, white, green, blue, white, blue, green, white, brown, brown. And essentially what you need to do is you need to flatten them all out to prepare them to go into that connector. And so the way that I do it is I lay them across my index finger and I kind of massage them, or I kind of work them for all those cables to be very close together. Meanwhile, pinching at the protective outer layer of the cable. Once you have them all in the order that is dictated by the B standard, what you can do is simply work them so that they're close together, because you need them to be right next to each other. Then I'm going to take my snips, and this part is where there's some guess and checks. They do make connectors called EZ connectors that allow you to push the cable through to actually see what's happening, and to make sure that your layout is appropriate to the standard. If you don't get those style connectors, which is what I do not have those style connectors for this demonstration, instead I have to cut it perfect. You get used to this, and in my opinion, I think it's easier to use the non-EZ connectors, the ones that don't pass through. And it's just kind of a guess and a trial and error. Essentially what you want to do is you want to cut this far enough back so that the wires go into the connector and that this protective sheeting here, or the protective outer layer of the cable, gets crimped with this tool into the connector. So it's just kind of a balancing act here, right? So let me check my cable here and make sure that I'm still wired out properly here. So what you'll want to do is you'll want to be holding these cables the whole time and essentially grab your snips, and I find that is the appropriate amount. It's about 1 finger length to the edge of where you want the cut to happen, because you're essentially cutting off the excess. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to go down here, make my cut, and I'm still holding on to it. I'm still holding on to the cable to prevent it from rolling or from preventing from anything getting out of line. Then what you want to do is, while you're holding this, you'll want to kind of insert the cables in a manner that they don't get twisted. And then you'll see you just kind of give it a nice push, make sure that all of the connectors, all the cables are up at the top there, and then grab your crimp, your Cat5 crimper, insert it into the 8-pin version, and crimp it down. And you'll notice that doesn't go anywhere. You'll notice that the jacket from the Cat5 connector is crimped here, so it's very protected. It won't go anywhere. Now we just need to do it again on the other end. So the same thing we did on the first time. You'll want to throw this into your Cat5 crimper. Most Cat5 crimpers have a special tool also built into them to cut the jacketing off of the cable. And so that's essentially what we're going to do here. What we want to do is you kind of do, a 200-degree turn to where it's like you get kind of both sides of it, and you're just leaving just that little bit left to get with the box knife or with the drywall knife. And again, sharp drywall knife, just resting it over and cutting the rest of that jacket off. Making the first initial cut on the cable doesn't matter. You could make this thing be 8 inches long, you can make it be a foot long. It really doesn't matter. Obviously, the catch here and the portion that will matter is if you do make it be a foot long, now you're going to have to unwind all of that and straighten all of those cables out. So there is a balance there. I find that for me to work with it and make it a little bit easier to maneuver, I find that about 2 inches is the appropriate length. And again, we're separating out the colors. And then we're going to go back and untwist the colors, or untwist the paired colors. Straighten them each out individually, still keeping them in their own space. Perfect, so we got all those separated out. Let's grab a connector so that it's standing by ready for us to utilize. And then let's go through our color code, following our sheet. And again, we're kind of just working that cable. We're kind of just working the cables, holding it with our index finger and our thumb so that they don't go anywhere. So you can see how unruly it gets when you have a longer, when you've cut that jacketing back significantly longer. You're dealing with too much excess that sometimes it can get a bit unruly on you. And so that's the reason that I only cut them back to at most 3 inches. I find that about 1.5 to 2 inches is the sweet spot. And so before I even try to put the connector on or cut anything off, what you'll see me do is you'll see me check this color probably twice. And so I've checked the color code to make sure that it follows in line with the standard that we're doing. I'm going to place the snips at the end here. Again, you'll see that it's about a finger length or an index finger length from the jacket to the end where I'm going to cut off. I'm going to hold this down. I find that it's also easiest if you take this portion here and you shoot that. When you cut this, it's going to shoot out this direction. If you point this into your trash can, all of those remnants go straight into the trash can, and it makes it just so much easier to do. So I have a trash can underneath my desk here that I'm going to shoot it into. Okay, so we've made that cut there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to grab our connector, again making sure that the tab portion is pointing up towards you. Slide in the cable. Make sure that all of the wires here at the very top are at the end, at the edge of the connector. Then what you want to do is grab your crimper, throw it into the appropriate 8-pin plug. Sometimes I think I've seen some where it's like 8, you know, this is a multi-use one where it includes all different kinds, but just make sure you're using the appropriate crimp for the connectors that you're using. That looks like a good cable to me. Now you ask, what is the Cat5 checker and how do I use it? Well, it's pretty simple. You plug it in each side. So this is the receive unit, and then this is the transmit unit. And so what you'll do is this is a very basic Cat5 checker. There are more advanced Cat5 checkers that can test the data speed, they can do all kinds of fancy things. This Cat5 checker, all it does is checks pin for pin. So in other words, it'll look at 1 for 1, 2 for 2, and so on and so forth. As it goes through, what's helpful with this is if you see them alternate, or if you see the lights flashing in an alternate order where it's not flashing 1 on one side and it may be flashing 2 on the other side, it means that your cable is wired improperly and you'll have to re-end one of the sides and look at it to verify that you don't have a twisted pair. So I'm going to turn this thing on, and what you'll see here is you'll see that they're running in order. And it might be easier if I put them together like this for you. And so what you'll see here is that they're running in order. This is a good Cat5. We could go plug this into our internet and it should work with no problem. If you followed along with the video today, you just made a Cat5 cable. Congratulations. Thank you for following along. Like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you next time for another episode of Full Spectrum.